Welcome in, college football fans. Thank you so much for tuning into the First and Long College Football Show. We are so glad that you're here, and we're ready to talk some season previews. It's that time of year, Mason. As we're recording this, you're going to be seeing this later on, but as we're recording this, we're less than 100 days away from the college football season, and that means that you need to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button on this video, and help us out and come hang out with us over on the First and Long College Football Show. We've got all your Power 4 coverage from all the best teams in college football, and right now we are in the midst of breaking down our top teams in the sport. And today we're going to be looking at number 35, which is going to be the USC Trojans. And to help me do that today, we've got our co-host of the show, Mason. Mason, how are you today, man?
Man, I'm doing good. Welcome everybody. This is the start. We're starting at number 35. We're going to break down our top 35 for the 2024-2025 season. And we're starting with USC. You know, they did make the cut, and we've got a lot of questions that we're going to get into, mainly on the defensive side of the football. Once again, I feel good about what Lincoln Riley's done to address the defense, but I'm excited to see, and I'm excited to see what they do. I'm a little bit concerned about what they do this year, but I'm excited to break it down with you, Mark. See what your thoughts are on what changes they've made on the defensive side of the football. We've got a whole new quarterback, right? You lose your Heisman quarterback in Caleb Williams. How's Miller Moss look? How's this new offense look? You know, with new receiving weapons as well. Let's break it down, Mark. Where you want to start?
Well, I think to kind of paint the picture of what's going on out there in Southern California, we got to kind of talk about what we've seen over the last couple of seasons. And Lincoln Riley, as a head coach in college football, starting in Oklahoma, obviously, and making his way out to Southern Cal, has been an offensive-minded coach, Mason, and I think sometimes almost to the detriment of the defense in certain situations. And a lot has been talked about. People talk about Ohio State, talking about their lack of physicality, and I'm not saying that I necessarily agree with that because I think Ohio State's a good team. But I think anybody that watches Southern Cal football or has over the last couple of years has noticed a lack of physicality. And that is what I think that Southern Cal fans are itching to see this year, as there was a ton of defensive coaching changes made. But let's start on the offense, and let's start with this head coach. And look, I mean, this guy has got a proven plan, a proven track record as a head coach to be successful. 19-8 at USC. I think he'd like to have some of those 8 losses back, obviously. But I think that Lincoln Riley has finally came to the realization that he's going to need some defense to be able to compete in a very ultra competitive Big Ten, which the USC Trojans are moving over to this year. We'll kind of break down the schedule at the end of this thing, but this is the only head coach to coach 3 Heisman winning quarterbacks. Okay, he's won 4 Big 12 championships and made the CFP 3 times. Now, hasn't had any success in the college football playoffs, but that doesn't mean that this isn't a great coach, Mason. If Lincoln Riley can figure out how to play some complementary football, and by that I mean his offense helping his defense and his defense helping his offense, I think this can it's not too late to turn the page, I guess is kind of what I'm saying. And what do you think? This has been a team over the last couple of years that's been fun to watch, but man, it's just on defense, it was like a bunch of kids at recess running around the playground, very disorganized. What do you think? I mean, what do you think that USC needs to do to be? We've got them ranked number 35 here. What do they need to do to be in the top 10, where USC fans feel like Southern Cal should be every year? What was your thoughts on the Southern Cal Trojans last year?
Yeah. Well, I mean, last year they started off 5-0. Things were looking pretty good. Ultimately, at Pac-12 was a tough conference last year. So, things were looking pretty good. And honestly, everything was decent about the season outside of the UCLA loss. I think that was the tough one at the end of the year for USC fans to watch Caleb Williams go out on. And ultimately, the story of the season was this defense did not play well, as you mentioned, did not complement the offense well, kind of hung them out to dry, really. So I think as a team, that's what you need to see USC do this year is play better defense, right? Everybody wants to play better, but defensively, they were absolutely terrible. Now, as a coach for Lincoln Riley, I think he did exactly what he needs to do. He went out and completely overhauled this defensive staff. And now they got to go play, and that's all you can really ask. They bring in, new transfer portal players as well as the new coaches, which I know we'll get to here in a minute. But ultimately, I think that Lincoln Riley did what he needed to do as a head coach. Got Alex Grinch the heck out of there. Guy was awful. He's been awful. I don't know what he was thinking about when he brought him over to USC in the first place. But ultimately, I can't fault Lincoln Riley for the job that he's done. Offensively, he's one of the best in the game, and has been, has been for a while. I like what he did as a head coach and really, stepped up and made some tough calls and fired some people. And now it's time to go play. I like what they brought in. So I'm excited to jump into that with you when we get to the defensive side of the football.
Well, before we do that, let's talk about this offense. And look, when I talk about the offense of a Lincoln Riley team, and I'll say that there's some areas of concern, and there's areas of concern on every team. So I just kind of want to preface that. But like if I was looking at the University of Georgia and there's a bunch of turnover on defense, I'm less worried about that because of who the head coach is. There's a defensive-minded head coach in Kirby Smart at the University of Georgia. I don't think Georgia's ever going to have a bad defense. And the same can be said about this USC offense. Mm-hmm. I trust this head coach to produce numbers on the offensive side of the ball. He brings in a couple of quarterbacks, and it's been said that this is a bit of a competition, Mason, but I don't think this is a competition at all. I believe Miller Moss is going to be your guy. Jaden Mayava has got a lot more experience. Okay, he does. You can see the yardage last year. Pretty solid numbers there. But for all intensive purposes, everything we saw in the spring game, the chemistry with the wide receivers, it seems like Miller Moss is going to be your guy. Definitely not your average Caleb Williams at quarterback, right? This is definitely a different look. But I think Miller Moss is the guy, and I think that Lincoln Riley likes what he sees there. I think a little bit more of a game manager type than Caleb Williams, and maybe that's what this USC this USC offense needs is somebody to just literally be a field general, right? And direct everybody where they need to go. And he doesn't have to play outside of his mind. He just needs to play within his means and don't make a ton of mistakes with this offense. And I think they're going to be fine. What do you think about Miller Moss and this supposed QB competition? To me, I'm not sold that it's a competition. I think that it's pretty much decided who's going to be taking the starting snaps in September.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. To me, this look, and not even just to me, Miller Moss is the best quarterback on this team. He's going to come in and start. He's going to be the guy. But you've got a competent backup in Jaden Mayava. Even though he played at UNLV, that he played pretty well last year. But this is a guy Mayava knew coming into wherever he ended up, who he was committed to Georgia for a little bit, was actually on campus for a little bit, and decided to go back to go back into the transfer portal and ended up at USC. But when he was at Georgia, he came in knowing that he had two guys to beat out in front of him. So he's fully content with sitting and waiting for a season in hopes that, next year, I think that, he obviously hopes that he'll be the starting quarterback for USC. That being said, Miller Moss, you see his stats on your screen here, almost 72%. 914 yards, nine touchdowns in 12 games. Most of those stats came from the bowl game, which was the most impressive. That's what everybody is talking about, is how well he played in the bowl game. Most recently, though, in the spring game, I think he did leave a lot to be desired by USC football, fans' perspective. I think if I were a fan of that program, I would want him to play a little bit better in the spring game. But it's a spring game. Like, you're there to learn, and you're there to get better. And I think he will. I think he's got some really good weapons around him, which we're about to get into. But ultimately, I really like what you've got in Miller Moss. Is he Caleb Williams? No. But Caleb Williams was the only Caleb Williams. So
one of a kind.
He is. And, Miller Moss is going to be a top 10 quarterback, I think, this year, statistically speaking, at least, with the Lincoln Riley offense and all. I think that he's going to be fine as a signal caller in this offense and in this system.
Well, for all you USC fans, you got to feel good about your backup in this situation. And again, Lincoln Riley has been very active in the transfer portal, and here he goes again, really answering the call, for quarterback. I mean, think about the lack of depth that would be in that room if it wasn't for the transfer portal. So hats off and kudos to Lincoln Riley there for keeping that room filled up with talent. And it looks like USC is going to be fine in that aspect this year. We got to talk about transfer additions. We just talked about the transfer portal. This is a reality for every single team in America. Just about everybody, maybe other than Dabo and Clemson, right? That's a whole nother story. Everybody else has gotten players that are going to contribute during the season, and USC is no different. Now, USC got way more defensive players in the transfer portal than they did offensive. Had guys leave from the offense. A couple of good ones. Dorian Singer was one of them. He goes over to Utah. So there was a few pieces that left, but as you can see on your screen here, Woody Marks comes over from Mississippi State. And Mason, I didn't even know this. He had 121 carries last year, 573 yards, as you can see on your screen there, 4.7 average in the SEC with a below-average offensive line. That's all great. But I did not realize that Woody Marks has the most receptions by any running back that's active in college football right now. This is a guy that's got great hands, and that sounds like a great match for this Lincoln Riley offense. What do you think about the addition of Woody Marks coming over from Mississippi State? And with all the exodus of talent that happened last year, whether it be NFL or guys just leaving out of the program, you got to have somebody step up at running back. And Lincoln Riley's been so good at putting guys in great positions to be successful in the running back backfield, and I think Woody Marks will be a great complement to this offense. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. From Woody Marks' perspective, you've got to look no further than Marshawn Lloyd last year and see him transfer in and immediately make an impact in the running game and in the passing game. I thought he was outstanding behind an offensive line that I think will be better this year. Marshawn Lloyd did some good things with an offensive line that was less experienced last year. So I think Woody Marks made a great decision, first of all. And I think that, that he's going to have an outstanding season. Look at what he did last year. Look at what he's done his whole career at Mississippi State. He's been playing since he was a freshman. This was a top 150 overall recruit in the country, which is really high for a running back. But what he did, I mean, in 4.7 yards per carry is pretty much what he averaged his whole career at Mississippi State, behind some pretty bad offensive lines, right? And going back to the Pirate era there, even this wasn't a running team, So, it kind of makes more sense when you look at the fact that he was in, that offensive system, the fact that he was catching so many footballs and it has so many, receptions out of the backfield. But ultimately, What I'm getting at is don't even pay attention to what he has done, because what he's going to do in Lincoln Riley's system will be totally different. This in conjunction with the offensive line, hopefully playing better this year for USC, with his skill set and his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield, I think what you're going to get is a running back that's got like 400 yards passing, or receiving, excuse me, and close to 1,000 yards rushing as well. I think he's going to be one of the best running backs, all-purpose backs in the Big Ten this year. And that's saying a lot. I think that you've got some really good ones, overall. You've got good ones at Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan. And I think he's going to be right up there with all of them. So, the running back room is secure with Woody Marks. And also, Amarian Peterson, who's like their third string back, he looked great in the spring game. Ran really physical, so I like the depth. Quentin Joyner, he's a stud as well. That running back room as a whole is pretty well set, I think, with a three-headed monster there.
Yeah, I thought it was a little interesting. There's only 4 running backs on scholarship or on the roster at all. So I like this running back room. I like Quentin Joyner. I think he's going to be a good piece. I think him and Woody Marks will be a good 1-2 punch. As you said, Amarian Peterson. Those are young guys working their way up in this system. And I'm glad they got Woody Marks, because he can play all downs as a running back. He can play every single down, and I think that's what this team needed. You didn't need a battering ram to bring in on third down. You needed an every down type of guy right now, and Woody Marks is definitely going to be that, as he can do anything on the field. I do worry. We know the attrition that happens at running back. Only 4 guys on the roster. I hope, God forbid, 2 of them go down, and you're down to 2 underclassmen there. I think that could be a little bit of trouble, but we can't plan on injuries. And as far as right now, it seems like everybody's in good health, and they've got at least a solid 4 and a really good 1-2. Let's kind of look at some of the returners. We've already talked about Miller Moss. And we won't rehash that. We know the questions that exist for Miller Moss, right? And none of them can be answered until the season is started and these actual regular season games get going. We'll see how he does in the heat of the moment. But a guy that really just electrified college football, especially at the beginning of the season last year, was Zachariah Branch. And this is really an all-purpose kind of I guess technically kind of a slot receiver. I think you're going to see him in that role a whole lot more. He played a lot of H-back last year, did a lot of different things, Mason. But most of all, was kind of an extension of the run game through the passing game. And I'm interested to see if they can utilize Zachariah Branch more in that slot wide receiver role, less of an H-back. And really see if he can run the routes and stretch the field. He did a whole lot of, left and right, work catching the ball behind the line of scrimmage and doing things. I'm interested to see if they can get him downfield a little bit this year. And of course, as Georgia Bulldogs fans, everybody remembers Deuce Robinson. There was a very hot recruiting battle that happened over that player. And I think USC fans are expecting him to step up this season. Had some good yardage last year, really good average there, as you can see on your screen, 16 receptions for 351 yards. When they hit him for a gash. And I think they're looking for more of that explosiveness. There are other returning players on this offense, but a lot of them are younger guys, especially at wide receiver. There's a lot of young talent in that room. So what do you think about these offensive returners? I think Zachariah Branch and Deuce Robinson are definitely playmakers. I think if you're a USC fan, you wish there was a few more returners on the offensive line, to build on. But these are some playmakers on your screen here, and doesn't even include the playmakers that are young guys that a lot of people don't know. They're not household names yet, and very possibly could be at the end of the year. What do you think about the playmakers on this offense, the wide receivers, the tight ends, that good stuff?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this wide receiver room is up there with Oregon in the Big Ten, and I know that they're a step below Ohio State, but so is every other team in college football. Nobody has the receivers that Ohio State has, but they're in that upper tier when you look at the wide receivers, especially the main three. Really, they really have about five solid receivers in Zachariah Branch, Deuce Robinson, Kyron Hudson, Makai Lemon, who had a great spring game, and also Jacoby Lane. So the four there's four sophomores there in Branch, Robinson, Lemon, and Lane, and that sophomore recruiting class is about to just pop. I mean, I don't know that anybody got a better four wide receivers in that class than what USC was able to haul in. And those guys are going to carry this team, ultimately. Not listed here, though. I think the offensive line, when you look at the five projected starters this year on the offensive line, they are all returning players. Technically, they do lose two off the offensive line, but as the season went on, those two kind of faded out as starters and were mostly just backup pieces. So I think that is going to help the offensive line ultimately, in the offense in general, tick a little bit more as having that experience on the O-line.
Yeah. Yeah, and they do have some experience. They've got some fourth and fifth year guys. If we talk about offensive line, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention Emmanuel Pregnon, 6'5", 320 pounds, redshirt senior. This guy is really, really good. Look, they're moving guys all around on this offensive line, and they have been doing that over the last couple of years anyway. And so a lot of these guys that are returning, a lot of them were starters. A few of them were not starters, but played roles on this team last year, multiple roles on the offensive line. You're going to have a new center this season, a player moving over to center that was playing some tackle and some guard last year. So snapping is always, look, we all watched Alabama struggle all year last year snapping the football, right? Something as simple as being able to snap out of the shotgun formation can possibly cost you a playoff game, as we saw. So, yeah, there are questions to be answered on this offensive line, but if we were to compare the offensive line and the defensive line, and I'm not just making this up, I know a lot of USC fans and commentators and content creators all agree that the offensive line is actually ahead of the defensive line a little bit right now. And so I feel like all in all, offensively, I feel like you got to feel pretty good with a guy like Lincoln Riley at the helm and all the tools in his tool bag that he's going to be able to pull out on people. I think that, as you said, this is one of the best wide receiver rooms in the country. I think the offensive line is going to be serviceable. I think you've got a really good number one running back there. I think you got talent in the running back room behind him. Overall, this is going to be a good offense, don't you think?
Yeah, no doubt. This is a top 10 offense in the country, in my opinion. Now, whether or not the defense gives them the opportunity to really kind of show what they can do, that's the big question mark to me, is on the defensive side of the football. Are the changes that they made, which you can see on your screen there, some of them at least, are those changes going to be enough this year? I do believe in these changes. I extremely believe in D'Anton Lynn as a defensive coordinator, but what are your thoughts on that? Can we get an effect this year where we're going to see on the field some sort of improvement and enough improvement to make them contenders in the Big Ten?
Yes and no. We are going to see a big difference in this defense. Okay, this Lynn comes over from UCLA, a team that had a really good defense last year, top 20 in the country, very disciplined defense. No one superhero on the defense, right? He did seem like a guy who can do more with less. And USC, I'm not saying has less. They've got very talented players, but this defense that he brings in, it brings in multiple looks. It's a complementary style defense. Okay, nobody has got to be a superhero. Everybody has just got to play the role, and it seems like a good personality fit for the personnel that USC has got on defense right now. Look, and we're gonna kind of go over some of the transfers that he's brought in, but he brought players with him from UCLA, and specifically secondary players that we'll talk about here in a few minutes. And these were not just decent players; they were good players. They were good players on this defense and a top 20 defense. So not only does he bring over, I think, a really good game plan that matches the personnel already on hand, but he brings over some players to supplement that personnel. Whenever the transfer portal created an exodus of talent, but I think kind of unreached talent, untapped talent, I guess you would say. This was a talented defense last year, but it doesn't matter whenever nobody knows what they're doing, right? And they're a bunch of kids running around on the playground. That's not going to happen this year, man. Lynn is not going to allow that. You got Eric Henderson coming in as a co-defensive coordinator, run game coordinator, defensive line coach. Matt Entz coming in. Look, Matt Entz is one hell of a coach, y'all. This guy lost like 10 games in like 8 years or something like that, or whatever it was at North Dakota. Look, I don't keep up with North Dakota, okay? But I've done some reading on this Matt Entz character, and I really, really like. You've got a head coach coaching defense. He's an assistant head coach for defense now. His job responsibilities were just cut into a quarter, and now he can focus on this defense with the help of Lynn. I'm a believer, Mason. I think we're going to see a difference this year. Is it going to be the difference in them winning a Big Ten title or not? I don't think so, Mason. They're plus 2,300 to win the Big Ten. Okay, if I really thought they were going to win the Big Ten, I'd throw $100 on that, and I'd be a rich man. Rich for me anyway, because I'm broke. But nonetheless, I believe that this is the change that needed to happen. I'm proud of Lincoln Riley for making the change because, as we talked about at the top of the show, Alex Grinch had followed him around everywhere he went. And I think it was a defensive coach who had kind of, he had him bought into the fact that offense was the priority. And I think that Lincoln Riley has sucked up his pride and realized that if he doesn't play this complementary style, it's going to be a bad go at it in the Big Ten. I think this coaching hire was right on time, and he went in the portal and got busy right away, man. Lots of talent added to this team. We can see our defensive transfer additions here on the screen. I talked about some of those players, the secondary players specifically coming over from UCLA. Kamari Ramsey's a badass. Okay, this is a really good player. Okay, and he's one of those guys that you watch on film and then you say, all right, we're going to do our very best not to throw that direction this game. He's one of those guys. And then another really good piece is the Arnold brothers. There's two Arnolds that they bring over from Oregon State, and both of them are very solid. But Easton is the one. He is a really, really good linebacker, Mason. Great open field tackler, very instinctual, tons of experience, over 100 tackles in his career. This guy has played a ton of snaps. Big get for the USC defense. And as you can see on the right side of your screen there, Nate Clifton comes in over from Vanderbilt. And we don't think of Vanderbilt and think, wow, they put out what a football factory that is. No, that's not the thought that comes to mind. But let me tell you something. There's been some great ball players go through Vanderbilt, and a guy like Nate Clifton has seen it all, brother. Mm-hmm. Vanderbilt has a very tough schedule every season. Very, very, very tough. They play some of the most talented college football teams in America every single season. Nate Clifton has seen and went up against those guys. He's going to bring a perspective to this team that I think is much needed. Some edge, some toughness, some physicality, as we talked about. So I could go on and on about this defense and the transfers that they brought in. There's tons of secondary guys, cornerbacks and safeties that they've brought in. And that's got to be a great sign if you're a USC fan. You've got to be happy whenever you see that. You say, finally, we're getting the guys in here that we need, whether it be from transfer portal or high school. It doesn't matter. We just need it, and we need it now. What do you think about this defense going forward and the transfer additions that they've added to the personnel? I think it was for the most part, Mason. I think it's been a home run.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to the defensive staff hires, bringing in Lynn from UCLA, top 15 overall defense. I think this guy's a future head coach. He's got all the pieces. He's a defensive backs minded defensive head coach, which I think is really important when they bring in Doug Belk from Houston, who maybe doesn't have the experience and the pedigree that some of these other assistant coaches have, but couple him with Lynn as the head coach, who can kind of keep his head in the backfield of that defense a little bit more. I think it's a good fit and a good balance. And speaking of the balance, you got Matt Entz, who comes in as the linebackers coach, but he spent time at linebackers and deep and the defensive line. And as a head coach, so he's got all that, and as a DC, so he's got all the pieces there, but kind of keeps that that expertise and that knowledge and experience in the box. So you got the back end covered with Lynn, the experience there, and then Ince in the box, and also Eric Henderson, who brings a wealth of knowledge for that defensive line as well, has NFL experience. I think this is one of the best defensive staffs when you just look at 4 coaches. They're lean. I mean, but the amount of experience, I can't say enough about the job that USC, that Lincoln Riley and Coach Lynn have all done to completely overhaul this staff. And I think at some point it will work out. Whether or not it's this season, I think the jury's still out. But when you look at the players that they brought in, like Kamari Ramsey, and then also the Arnold brothers, and then also John Humphrey, who was another UCLA transfer that comes in to play in this secondary. I think that's huge. If you look at the defensive units individually, everybody will tell you that this defensive backs room is looking so much better. You expect that with the 2 coaches they brought in, and you expect that somewhat with the 2 UCLA transfer players that come in. But also, Arnold's gonna probably be that strong safety starter as well, and that's Achille Arnold that's going to be playing at strong safety. And ultimately, I think as a USC program, that's what you want to see, right? I thought that the defensive line played pretty well last year, specifically in the middle. And when you couple that with a strong, well, first of all, you're bringing a lot of those guys back, but you couple that with a strong secondary, and I think that the sky's the limit for this offense, or for this defense. I've got some questions at inside linebacker. I think that that's answered a little bit with Easton Arnold coming in, but ultimately, if you've got a really good defensive line and a good defensive secondary, it's going to be tough for teams to really scheme up against you, for offenses to scheme up against you. Ultimately, I think that the secondary is going to get better, and you've got Bear Alexander, you've got Mason Cobb there on the defense, but also one player that I think coming out of spring practice to keep your eye on, who has been with the program for a while now. He's a redshirt senior, but defensive tackle behind nose tackle behind Bear Alexander, Kobe Pepe, has had an excellent spring. And I think that he is going to allow this defense to do a little bit of a few different things, ultimately, with Bear Alexander and maybe him in a goal line stance, seeing the field at the same time. But also give Bear Alexander a little bit of a breather. He's not been the most well-conditioned defensive tackle in the league, or nose tackle in the league. So it kind of gives him a chance to get a breather every now and then, and without having any drop-off or as much drop-off. Bear Alexander's an outstanding player, but I think Pepe stepping up is going to really help out this defense ultimately.
Yeah. They got a lot of guys on that defensive line. I mean, that's a deep group, tons of names, tons of bodies, some guys coming back. But as you said, it wasn't a super productive group last year, and
Mhm.
the defensive line is the anchor of your defense. It's no secret, and whenever you're going into a conference like the Big Ten, lines of scrimmage are everything. It all starts with the line of scrimmage, and that defensive line is going to be going up against some absolute maulers
Yeah.
in that Big Ten. So it's
I,
going to be imperative for the linebackers to be freed up to make plays for this defensive line to hold their ground, Mason. It's going to be so important, and it's literally going to make or break this team.
Yeah, last year we saw the defensive line do an excellent job with pass rush, but it seemed like they were whiffing in the backfield on some tackles for a loss. It seemed like they were getting gashed in the running game, and I'm wondering if bringing in a guy like Nate Clifton will help contain that edge a little bit more, and also Anthony Lucas in another year, as a transfer, give him another year in this system with better coaching. I think that they're going to be a little bit better in the run game this year, where last year it seemed like they had some holes for sure.
Yeah, need some of those guys to step up. Jamil Muhammad needs to step up. That guy's an upperclassman at this point. A guy at linebacker, Eric Gentry, I think is a guy that could step up for this team a little bit. Mason Cobb played really good last year. I think that he probably should have played more, honestly. But now that you've got a guy like Lynn, a defensive coordinator, I think he's going to be able to utilize these guys a lot better than what we've seen in the past, where the defense just wasn't even prioritized on this team. I think it's obviously something that they have made an emphasis to correct this season, and I think it's definitely going to show through the coaching and the schematic side of it. Whether it shows through their record this season or not, that's yet to be seen. But I am happy with the strides that are being made. But as we said, the defensive line will make or break this defense this season. And I'm very interested to see how they respond. Let's jump into the schedule if you don't have anything else on that defense, Mason.
Nope.
And look, you don't have to look far on the schedule, folks, to find some entertaining football. September 1st, and we are not honestly all that far away. The time we're recording this, we're getting close to the start of June here. We're not far away, folks. As you can see, that LSU game is going to be played in Las Vegas September 1st. That is going to be an absolute thriller. LSU has kind of been on one with this whole start the season off with a big opponent thing. And this year is going to be no exception. But that third week of the season, you go to Michigan. I think that's going to be very, very telling. I think Michigan's going to be a strong football team. And I think we're going to see that third week what the looks of this USC lines of scrimmage are and how it's going to hold up in a conference like the Big Ten. We're going to know more after that game in the week 3. And then you've got to go you got Wisconsin at your place. That's another game where that line of scrimmage for Wisconsin is massive, okay? And it's a Luke Fickell coach team. They're going to run the football. We'll see how that physicality matches up with a team like that that's just massive and wants to grind you into the dirt. But one good thing about this schedule, Mason, no Oregon and no Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big help because that's, for most people's money, the top 2 teams in the Big Ten this season. You see you got Penn State there at home, at Washington. Now, Washington, I know, played for a national championship last year, Mason, and but I don't think they're going to be very good this year. So I think you kind of luck up there and get to stay on the West Coast there. Don't have to go too far from home. I think that's big. I think Nebraska will be better, but I think USC has an edge there. UCLA was coachless not all that long ago there for a few days, so they got a brand new coach. I could see that being a dub there in that rivalry game. And then you end the year with Notre Dame. This game has been scooted back on the schedule. That's a really, really awesome end of the year football game there. USC Notre Dame has been a game that for many years for me has been one that I've just always had my eye on. I don't live anywhere near these teams. I've never been to either one of these stadiums, but whenever USC and Notre Dame come on for whatever reason, Mason, maybe it's just my upbringing with college football. It's must watch TV for me. as are a lot of these games on this schedule. What do you think about the new Big Ten USC schedule, Mason? So weird to see these opponents on here, but man, it's going to be super exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Heck of a change from the Pac-12 schedule. Although you do still have Washington and UCLA that you get to face at least this year, coming over. Sort of your cousins from the Pac-12, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that this schedule ultimately sets up pretty favorably for USC. Your over and under is at 7.5. And I just kind of want to go through sort of each game here real quick. So LSU neutral site, it's going to be an offensive shootout. Both of these teams are very similar in what they've been able to do offensively, not necessarily matching up with what they are doing defensively, and both are under a defensive coaching staff overhaul, and LSU's actually got an offensive coach that they're going to be breaking in as well. So week one, I kind of want to give the edge to USC here because of what I've seen from their coaching changes so far, and I really trust Lincoln Riley and the offensive staff a little bit more than I do with LSU and Brian Kelly right now. And also we've seen LSU drop games to Florida State, in week one as well. So to me, looking at that week one game, neutral site in Las Vegas, I think I want to lean towards USC there. Obviously Utah State. And then you got to go to Michigan. Now, I think that's going to be a wake-up call for this USC defense. I think that the Michigan offensive line is going to show them something that they're not ready for at that point in the season. That's going to be a really tough matchup for them to compete with, really. And the defense for Michigan's not getting any worse this year. There's not much of a drop off on that side of the football. And I think that they're going to be really good and stand up, against USC. It's going to be a tough environment to play in. That place is going to be absolutely packed. So I've got that one as a loss for me. Moving on to Wisconsin, you do get them at home. I think that's really important here for USC. Wisconsin hasn't proven themselves yet under Luke Fickell. I think that they will. This is going to be a close game, but I think the firepower of USC's offense is going to be enough to pull this one out. Minnesota, I've got that as a win for USC. I do think that Minnesota is going to be tough. This could be a tricky game, could be a trap game right in between Wisconsin and Penn State. It's one that could go either way. I think on paper, though, USC should win that game. And then you get Penn State at home. And this is what's really interesting. So going back to week 3, you had the wake-up call. Excuse me, that would actually be week 4 because they get a bye week in week 3. But you had the wake-up call against Michigan, right? I think that defense is going to be settled in by week 6 or by game 6 at this point against Penn State. Again, another home game that's really important for USC here. I think that Penn State could end up beating USC at USC, but I have my questions about their offense. I have just as many questions about their offense as I do USC's defense. So to me, I think I want to lean towards USC for that game, with it being a home game, and also with the defense probably playing a lot better by the time they get to that game. So if you're keeping score here, I've only got one loss so far. Maryland, I think at Maryland could be tough, but I've got that as a win. Rutgers, I have as a win at home. At Washington, I think is favorable. Washington's got a whole new team, it seems like. Everything. In general. Everything's going to be different for Washington. Could be good, could be bad, but ultimately I think they'll win that one. Nebraska at home, I think is going to be a win with a new quarterback in Dylan Raiola. I don't know that Nebraska is quite there yet under Matt Rule. UCLA is going to be a win. And then you got Notre Dame. At this point, right, USC's 10-1 in my eyes, at least. They probably will have dropped a game or two by then, but anyways, against Notre Dame's going to be really good this year, folks. We will be doing a breakdown of them. I think they're in our top 10, if I'm not mistaken. So stay tuned on that one. I've got that one as a loss for me. I think it's going to be a really close game, but I don't know that that USC is going to be able to contain this offense for Notre Dame. Ultimately, I think that Riley Leonard's gonna be a problem on the ground and maybe through the air even with Notre Dame. That offensive line, similar to Michigan's, it's going to be really tough for USC to deal with. So ultimately, I do think that this is going to be about a 9-3 season. As I paint the picture in a very optimistic way, I do realize that they will drop another game somewhere. But ultimately, I think that Michigan and Notre Dame are going to be losses. I think another one happens somewhere along the way. It could be LSU. It could be Penn State. I think that those are very reasonable. And even if they lose both of those games, they're still going over 7.5 wins. So for me, I think it's 8-4 and 10-2 is kind of the range. But I think that 9 wins is pretty reasonable for this team.
Yeah. Yeah, at first glance, 9-3 is my thoughts. The over/under win expectancy is set at 7.5 by FanDuel and pretty much most of the odds makers that you'll look at. Plus 2,300 odds to win the Big Ten. Several teams there in front of USC that are favored in that conference. I like a 9-3. I think I could see 8-4 as well. I think Michigan is a definite loss. I think Penn State's a loss. I think you got to be real careful at that Maryland game. You're going to Maryland. Mm-hmm. I could see sleepwalking in there. That's going to be homecoming for the Maryland Terps that night. That's going to be interesting to see. And it seems like Maryland is always one of those teams that everybody just kind of looks over and, they were one of the best run defenses in all of the Big Ten last year. They had a good offensive situation last year, minus, turnovers. So there's some teams in the Big Ten that'll sneak up on you, especially whenever you go to a place like Maryland in October. You never know. It could be very cold. I don't think that's one thing that I feel like people haven't talked a lot about, Mason, is these USC, these Southern Cal boys that have been played on the West Coast, and now they've got to go, to Washington in November, right? Mm-hmm. Possibly play in 40-degree pouring down rain, right? That's very, very possible in Washington. There's just several of those games on here that I'm interested to see. I just want to see how the USC Trojans respond. But all in all, I think the USC Trojans have made a step in the right direction this season, going into this season with the coaching changes and the talent acquisition that's went on. And all in all, I feel like this is going to be a good squad. I think it will be improved. I cannot wait to see this defense. All you USC fans, if you're watching this video still, you're a sycophant just like we are, okay? You're a college football nut. And what I need you to do right now is go hit that like and subscribe button. Make sure you're hanging out with the First and Long College Football Show. We want to hear your comments. Let us know what you think USC's record's going to be this year. Are they winning the Big Ten? Were the right defensive hires made? I want to hear from you in the comment section. You guys know USC football better than we do, right? All the fans of that program, right? We want to hear from you. So all you USC Trojan fans, welcome to the First and Long College Football Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Everybody have a great day, and we'll see you for college football season.